Hi everyone, I'm Claire from Cookston Crafts and I am going to show you how to make this brioche cowl. So it's a great introductory pattern if you've never tried brioche before, and if you haven't tried brioche before, I would recommend just concentrating on these column stitches. These cable twists are perhaps for when you've mastered this part of the pattern and you can introduce these wherever you like. It's a very flexible pattern. I'm going to begin by describing the different colours. So I would always recommend that you go for two highly contrasting colours when you're working with brioche. One of the things that I have found is that knitting in the round is simpler, and yeah, just use some two highly contrasting colours. I'm going to use this green, this teal green as my main colour, and then this pink as my accent colour. And in the actual pattern itself, I have colour coded certain sections of the pattern, which should hopefully make it a little easier for you too. I'm going to be demonstrating on just this really short circular, but I recommend a 5mm needle, 60 centimetres long. I'm going to just cast on a fewer amount of stitches just so that I can demonstrate faster and you don't have to watch the whole process. So to begin with, I'm going to start with the dark teal, and I'm going to use just my long tail cast on method for knitting in the round. So I start off with a slip knot. Now you don't want to do a knitted cast on. Anything that can stretch out over this cable is not the best for this project in particular, because when you come to work the first round, you'll really struggle to get these stitches to move and get your needle into them. So I like to do a long tail cast on, and just whatever way that you normally do that. I've just made a little slip knot, and I use the slingshot method, so I have the long tail over my thumb and the working yarn over my forefinger, and I pull it back slingshot style, and I go underneath that first loop, over the second, and pull it through. I'm going to just move this out of shot. So I pull it back so that I've got two loops, under that loop, over that loop, and down. Okay, I have cast on a fewer amount of stitches just because I am demonstrating on a small needle, but you should have cast on 90 stitches, just using whichever preferred method that you like. I'm going to now cast on one extra stitch, which is just going to help me join in the round. So I'm going to slip the needle. I'm making sure that I don't have any twists in the cast on first of all, and I'm going to twist this first stitch, slip this first stitch, and then lift the right hand stitch over the top, and then pull it up nice and tight. And that's it, joined in the round. I'm going to pop in a stitch marker. This is your friend. You need these stitch markers to help in this process. If you don't have a metal stitch marker like this, use a different colour of yarn, but it's really important that you remember to replace your stitch marker every round. It really helps with the process. So I'm going to just reposition my yarn. Now I am a continental knitter normally, so I hold my working yarn in my left, so this might look a little clumsy. I find throwing with my right quite awkward, but we're going to go ahead and knit all of the stitches around. And you might find that it takes a wee minute just to loosen off all those stitches that we've cast on and get these stitches freely moving. So you might need to push them up and move them round as you go. I'm just nearing the end of row 1 or round 1, and I've knit all of the stitches. I'm going to just slip that marker over, and then in round 2 we're going to purl every stitch. So I'm just bringing my yarn forward between the needles, ready to start working. So ready to start working that round. See how my yarn has gone around that stitch marker like this. I could possibly use a smaller stitch marker, but we don't want that to happen because we're going to get a gap between there. So always try and make sure that your yarn is coming in front of the stitch marker there. Don't worry too much about that. It's probably just my clumsiness with my throwing of my right hand. So go ahead and purl every stitch in this round. I'm at the beginning of round 3 and I'm going to slip the orange marker and then I'm going to knit every stitch around, and I'm just making sure that I don't have any yarn getting in the way of that stitch marker. The final stage of this setup section is to slip the stitch beginning of round 4, and we are going to purl all of the stitches. So bring the yarn in front of the marker and purl every stitch around. I'm just nearing the end of this setup section and I'm purling that last stitch. I'm going to slip my marker, and we want to make sure that our yarn is in front of us. So this working yarn, main colour, stays at the front. We're about to start the contrast colour row, the first contrast colour, and this is the setup row. It must be done on a knit round. The reason I like to do this setup stage is just so that our stitches are moving freely around our circular needle and we're not having to battle with that as we're also introducing the brioche setup and our contrasting colour. It's just one less thing to think about. So I'm about to do it now, and I'm going to knit the first stitch with my contrasting colour. Bearing in mind I do have my main colour at the front here, it's going to stay there, and I'm going to knit this first stitch. So just like that. I was making that look really awkward, and it's because I am so inclined to use my left hand. Apologies. So I'm making sure that I've got the working tail, and I'm going to bring that yarn forward. I'm then going to slip the next stitch purlwise, and then I'm going to go ahead and knit the next one. Because my yarn is in front now, I just bring my yarn over the back and around like this to knit. Yarn in front, slip, knit. So what we're doing, we're creating almost a wrap over the top of that stitch here. Whenever you see that, you deal with that as if it were one stitch. So after a knit, we yarn in front, we slip, and then we knit. Yarn in front, slip, knit. Now, I do like to do that as one process, if you like. Yarn in front, slip. Some people prefer to bring their yarn over the back to then knit. It really doesn't make any difference. I just find that this makes for a smoother process. And we continue to do that all the way around. So just after every knit, we bring our yarn in front, we slip, and then we go into the next one knitwise and we knit it. I'm going to just move this out of shot to make it a little clearer. So after a knit stitch, we pull our yarn forward, slip the next stitch purlwise, and then go ahead and knit the next stitch. I'm nearing the end of round 5, and I'm about to do a slip stitch and then a knit. And if you've got the correct amount of stitches, we should end with our yarn forward, and I'm going to slip that final stitch. Now this is a bit that can be problematic because we need to remember to wrap this stitch. If we look behind here, we've got a wrap, a normal knit, a wrap, a normal knit. So this one needs to be wrapped. So I need to take my pink yarn over the top and bring it forward to the front before I slip my marker. And that's your first round complete. So at the end of round 5, I've just popped my marker on here. I'm about to start working the beginning of round 6, and that's going to be with our contrasting colour. So the green is where we left it, and I'm going to just slip that first stitch. I might need to tighten it up a little, it's come a little loose. Slip this first one, and it's going to be wrapped. So I'm going to do a yarn over with this green yarn. So I'm yarning over and I'm pulling my yarn back to the front, because this one is going to be purled, brioche purled. So as I said earlier, every time you see one of these wrapped stitches, you treat it as if it were one stitch. So I'm going to just go ahead and brioche purl. And then I'm going to slip this stitch, but I'm going to wrap it. So I'm wrapping my yarn around the needle back into the right position so that I'm ready to brioche purl the next one. I'll do a few of these. So I'm going to slip this one, wrap, and then brioche purl. So I'm treating both of these as if they were one stitch. My needle is coming behind both strands. I'm almost at the end of round 6, and I'm just gonna wrap that one, brioche purl, wrap that one, and then this final stitch, if we've remembered to put our pink round and bring it to the front, we should end with a wrapped stitch like this that we're going to brioche purl. I find that the most common mistakes made are at this section, at the end section. My yarn is in front already, and that's where I'm going to leave it, the main colour yarn. I'm then going to slip my marker, and we're going to be working with the pink next. So at the beginning of round 7, we've slipped our marker. We're going to move this yarn now to the back. So it was in the front previously, and we're going to move it to the back because we're about to knit with it. So that first stitch, the wrapped stitch, we just went ahead and knitted, and we bring our yarn forward, we slip, and then we go into this next one. We're going to wrap that stitch, but because of the position that our yarn is already, that's already happening, we're going to go ahead and knit that next stitch. Yarn forward, slip. Now you can wrap and then knit. So you can see, if you get lost at any point, try and separate. Sometimes these stitches have a tendency to sit on top of one another. And if you just stretch them out so that you can clearly see what's going on, you can see that that one is a wrapped stitch and that is a regular stitch there. So whenever you see the wrapped ones, we are going to be knitting them. Yarn forward, and then when we've got a single stitch, we're just going to slip it. And the benefit of doing 2-colour brioche is that all of our knit stitches will always be done with the pink, and all of the purl stitches will be done with the green, and it can be really handy to write that down on your pattern, particularly if you're going to be putting this down and coming back to it later. I would never ever suggest putting it down mid-row. Try, if you can, to get to the end of a row, because it's just much easier to work out where you're at in the pattern. I'm nearing the end of round 7, and I'm going to show you what that's going to look like. So we're going to slip that one because it's going to be wrapped with that yarn. I'm going to knit it, and then this final stitch, we bring our yarn forward, we slip it, but it's going to need to be wrapped and bring our contrast colour, our pink, to the front. So at the end of every round, I always bring my yarn forward to the front. Pop my slip marker over, and now I'm going to be working with the contrast colour for the beginning of round 8. we are going to slip the first one purlwise, wrap it, and then purl, brioche purl this stitch. So we're going to slip that one, brioche purl that one, slip, I like to do it when I wrap, that I just go into the stitches as if I was going to slip it purlwise, and I like to do the wrap there at that stage and then slip it off. It's completely up to yourself. So I go in and I wrap and then slip it, rather than slip it onto the right needle. I just find that a little bit more awkward. You can see I'm struggling to get the yarn around, whichever way is easiest for you. I'm almost at the end of round 8 and I'm going to just slip this one and then purl this wrapped stitch together and drop my main colour yarn, my green, pass over my marker, and then I'm ready to work with the contrast colour again, and it's going to be knit. So it's round 7 and 8 form the pattern if you want to just go ahead and do these columns. I would suggest you do it 4 more times. Usually by that point you can work out how confident you are with the stitches and whether you want to progress on to work out how to do these decreases and increases, and I'll show you that in just a second. I have gone ahead and repeated rows 7 and 8 4 more times, and this is what appears. So you can see the nice pink columns here and our teal green wraps in between, and if I flip it round you'll get the opposite effect, which is quite cool as well. So it's a fully reversible item. If this is your first brioche project, you might want to just carry on repeating rows 7 and 8 until you've got the depth of cowl that you would like. But if you want to go ahead and do these cable twists, I'm going to demonstrate that now. So this section here is what we're about to work on, which is a brioche left leaning decrease. Bit of a mouthful, and when you read the paragraph in the pattern it'll be like a foreign language. It's much easier in practice. So I'm going to take you through round 17 at the moment. I've slipped my marker and then I'm going to be working with this pink contrast colour yarn, and I'm going to bring it to the back ready to knit with it. The first step is to brioche knit 1. So just like we did before, yarn forward, slip 1 purlwise. And we're going to repeat that 3 times. So we brioche knit, we yarn forward, slip 1, brioche knit, yarn forward, slip 1. Now we're now at the BRL DEC, brioche left leaning decrease. So we're going to slip this stitch here that has a wrap. So we're going to treat it as if it were 1. And we're going to slip it knitwise. Now note, my yarn is still in front here. Technically it's going to wrap that one when I come to work these next few stitches. So just don't worry too much about the position of this yarn as long as it is here. We're going to slip this knitwise and don't do anything at that stage. The next point, we're going to knit the next 2 together. So we're going to knit this normal stitch and this brioche knit stitch together. So it's going through all 3 strands. My yarn is going over the back of the needle and we're going to knit those 2 together. And then I'm going to slip this one over the top. So that's our wrapped stitch here. That's what our yarn has just done automatically. And I'm going to go into these stitches, the ones that we just slipped, and they come over the top. I'll do that a few more times though. So I'm going to go yarn forward, slip, knit, yarn forward, slip, knit, yarn forward, slip, knit. So I've got my decrease here, I've got 1, 2, 3 columns, and then I'm going to finish up that section of the repeat by slipping that final stitch. My yarn is in this position. I'm going to slip the first one knitwise, and then I'm going to go through both of these, this wrapped stitch and the single stitch, all of them together. My yarn is coming over the top of the needle, around like that, to force those two together, and then this stitch that we just slipped comes over the top. Yarn forward, slip, knit, yarn forward, slip, knit, yarn forward, slip, knit, yarn forward, slip, and we're about to decrease. So we slip these two, or this one stitch but it's wrapped, knitwise, knit those next two stitches together, slip that one over the top, and that brings those two columns together to kind of like a point. And then this final one, this is going to finish up our decrease section. So I'm going to slip this one, I'm knitting all these together. It's just the next two stitches, it looks like 3. Oops, I've split the yarn there, I'll do that again. And slipped that one over. My yarn then comes in front and it's going to slip this very final stitch. So I'm wrapping that very final stitch. I'm leaving my contrast colour yarn at the end. So that's the end of round 17. My yarn is in front, I've slipped my marker. I'm going to slip this one purlwise, yarn over or around, Brioche Purl. I'm almost at the end of row 18, so I'm just brioche purling, slip and wrap, and then I end with a brioche purl. I'm going to drop that yarn, slip my marker, pick up my contrasting colour, and I'm going to go ahead and do round 19, which is the increase row. So we are going to bring the contrast colour yarn to the back of the work because we're ready to knit. We're going to brioche knit this first stitch, yarn forward, slip one purlwise, and we repeat that 3 times. Brioche knit, slip, brioche knit, slip. We then brioche knit, yarn over, brioche knit in the next stitch. So you'll see that this is directly above where we made the decrease before. So this final stitch here is just a slipped stitch, but because of the position of my yarn, it's going to create that wrap anyway when I do this next move. So I'm going to go into the brioche knit as I would normally. I'm going to knit, and then I'm going to yarn over again, and then go back into that same stitch again to do another brioche knit. So I've created 3 stitches. I'll demonstrate that again in just a second. So we're repeating that sequence. We knit, slip, knit, slip, knit, slip. Here's us at the decrease. So we're about to increase back up to 3 stitches again. My yarn is in front already. I'm just going to It's gotten a little tangled. So I'm going to go into it as if I was just doing a regular brioche knit as usual. But rather than pull those stitches off, I'm going to bring my yarn back around the needle again and then go back into that same stitch again. So effectively, I've got 3 stitches now made. I'm about to finish up with a main colour row, round 20. My yarn is in front already, my marker's been slipped. I'm going to slip this one purlwise. And wrap my yarn around the needle. Brioche purl. And you continue as usual until you get to the increased stitch that we created in the last round, and you'll see now that there are 3 stitches here. I'm just using my fingernail to straighten them out. They can sometimes become a little bit overlapped, and you just carry on the sequence as you would have normally. So we had a wrapped stitch here, a brioche purl here, so this one is a wrapped stitch. The center one I'm going to just purl as normal, and then this final one I'm going to brioche purl, and that's us got our sequence in right to continue for the next round. I'll just demonstrate that again. So that's me got to the increased stitch from the previous round. I've straightened out these 3. I've just done a brioche purl. So this one is going to be a slipped stitch, wrap, brioche purl as normal, and then slip, brioche purl, or brioche slip with a wrapped. And that is a wrap, folks. Hopefully you have enjoyed that and it helps you on your brioche journey.